NorCal, 209 King of Comedy. It's Rick without the K. James presents, in my opinion, podcast.
All right, you guys, we're back. Next question. We're going to get a little more serious. Hopefully, I get the prop number right. If I don't, fuck you, viewers. I bring this up because this is where I wish my other co-host was on here, because we talk about affirmative action, right? And there was a proposition here in California that just went through. I'm not sure if it went through, but it was on the ballot in November. It was Prop 16, and it talked about affirmative action. And me and my other co-host Ronnie, we always talk about it, and he's like, glad we took away affirmative action. It's done this, it's done that. And it's one of those things where you read the headline, but you don't read the actual fucking story.
Right.
So I'm glad I've got you on this episode. I don't know how well versed you are in it. I'm kind of whatchamacallit on it, right?
Not as firm with the action.
Yeah. But I just feel like people hear the headline and they really don't know shit about much. And I just feel like affirmative action, one of the quotes that I've been saying since the last episode is, while colored people have been fighting for equality, white people have been building equity.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is fucking a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. Right? And I just find that as an interesting quote. So when I talk about shit like affirmative action, I'm like, where is the level playing field? Like, it's still not as leveled as you want to perceive it to be nowadays. Mm-hmm. And how do we get to that place so that our kids can have more? Right. So I guess I'm gonna switch over to you, and you could go on your tent rate on what you thought the proposition was about, and
then I'll say,
yeah.
Affirmative. I agree on those actions.
In the affirmative. Yes. So Prop 16 was actually trying to undo Prop 209, which was like 1986 or something like that. And that's when California became one of only 8 states in the United States, I think, maybe 6 or 8 states, that says that you can't use race or color as a part of a decision in government contracting, in allowing people into school, into colleges, or in like tons of things. So you're essentially saying affirmative action based on race, actually, and not just on race, but also for women, for ethnic minorities in general, is out. And so Prop 16 was simply saying, like, yo, we have seen the negative outcomes of this bill, of what Prop 209 did in the state of California. And to the quote that you just said, it's a perfect example of we oftentimes only focus on the college piece, and oftentimes affirmative action is used as a tool to say, let's divide races. So let's say that somebody isn't getting something because we're actually looking at others who've been cut out in the first place. So perfect example would be when Prop 16 came up. From the college point of view, the first thing they said was, you're cheating the Asians, because Asians have no problem getting into college. Asians score high or as high as the whites. So why can't you Latinos and blacks figure your stuff out? Well, why do you want to cut out the Asians? Because when you do that, when you do Prop 16, essentially what you're saying is you want to give a quota lie to black folk and Latinos that's going to cause Asians to not get as much. There is no quota. There is no predetermined number or anything like that associated with affirmative action. That's usually the first thing that people say, oh, here you go with quotas. Affirmative action isn't about quotas. It's about opportunity. And so in that, it's saying that in the college scenario, that if you have a campus in California that overwhelmingly represented, the state is represented by Latino population, but you barely have any Latinos on campus, it's probably in the best interest of all of your students that they actually be able to interact with in classes and in campus life and otherwise with Latinos who they're going to have to deal with every day, regardless of what our college numbers are. Mm-hmm. What a concept. Same thing with the black population. Then in terms of government contracts, the state of California has, well over $1 billion worth of contracts that small businesses have gotten cut out of because they can't compete with larger businesses. And who typically owns those larger businesses? White folk. And then this goes directly back to your quote of while black folk and others are sitting out here, trying to just get basic opportunity, that they're out there building wealth and equity because they now have the riches to come in and say, you know what, we're going to cut X number of dollars out of this government contract. Or we're able to get this government contract because the amount of money that we pay for all of our other resources and labor and equipment is far less than what a small business would have to pay. And so by saying that we're going to make sure that a given number of our dollars in the state are going to go to ethnic minority businesses and otherwise, you're allowing people to play in the game. Because when you hire ethnic minorities, they hire ethnic minorities. And so now you actually see the job force shift. So in the United States, you take the unemployment for white folk, and then you take the unemployment for black folk. The unemployment for black folk easily doubles that of white folk. And when you actually put people and people can say racist or whatever else, but the reality is people typically hire people that look like them, or that they're most familiar with, or that they have most connection with. And in these United States of America and the rest of the world, most people of like kind live in the same community, hang out together, or are in family.
That makes sense. And
so the idea that this is a concept of stealing from white folk who, frankly, and as a black man in America, it's like this country is still running on the sweat and equity of my ancestors, up and down. And so everyone's benefited from that.
So I guess, how do you address the people? Because one of the topics that was brought up between me and my co-host, or in the movie of Crash, is like, well, his dad was a firefighter. And he goes, well, in the 80s, there was good white firefighters that couldn't get those jobs because of affirmative action. Like, how do you address that? Where you're like, was that, or was that, again, is that one of those things that you were told, so you're pushing that scenario on people?
That's that false narrative piece, man. And there's always so many people talking about what they didn't get because of affirmative action. And one, there were no quotas on affirmative action. There wasn't anyone sitting up here saying we can't hire white people. Now what you will see is people are saying that if people are equal in terms of their ability, then we're going to give the preference to the ethnic minority, or the woman, or the Vietnam veteran, or the disabled person. And a lot of people, like to ignore the woman, the Vietnam veteran, and the disabled person. Yeah. They're like, oh, it's just going to black people. Or it's just going to these Latinos. Well, these other components, like white women benefit more from affirmative action than anybody. White women, I'm going to repeat that. White women benefit from affirmative action more than anybody. All right? And so then there's this whole disabled veteran piece. I'm a veteran myself. I believe we should be doing good things for veterans. But when you think about it in context of when you're talking about an oppressed group, when you're talking about, okay, affirmative action, the first thing that people think is black, and then secondly, they might say, oh, maybe some Latinx too. And then everybody else, they're like, yeah, it's just them. They're the only ones benefiting. But the reality is white women get tons of benefit from this. And oftentimes they come from rich white dads who are already privileged, but they're taking another spot simply because of being women. And you know what, that sounds wrong, and I'm going to qualify that in that women deserve to actually be getting that opportunity because they're paid 80 cents on the dollar, and that's the white women. They
don't have expenses that we have, though.
They have to buy tampons. Come on.
They have more expenses.
They should get 20 cents more for feminine products. They should make $1.20 per dollar.
They get free
ladies.
dinners. So
They paying for our dinners now, bro. What you talking about?
Shit, I'm dating the wrong kind of women.
As I say, my wife has a degree and I don't.
Right. And so that's where a lot of that comes down to. Is so we like to use race as the de facto beneficiary of affirmative action, but all too often it's not. But you will see, as an example, like the GI Bill, the original GI Bill that bought most of the people's houses. So when people say, oh, my great granddaddy was in the war, and after he came home from the war, he was able to use the GI Bill under Roosevelt or one of those guys and buy us a house way back when, and which houses create equity. Guess who didn't get the benefit from that?
Oh yeah,
black
yeah,
folk.
I think
the GI Bill was not available to black folk. You couldn't get the GI Bill if you're black. So you can go and die for your country, and you come back, you get the opportunity to get a house or even education opportunity. And the two best ways of generating wealth and upward mobility are equity from houses and education. Black people were cut out of that, even though they died and or hurt themselves going through that. Then they created Social Security. Well, I'm from the South. The Social Security was determined by the states implementing it. Ain't no state in the South said they're going to give Social Security benefits to black folk. So everybody came home generating money from Social Security. Black folk were cut out. But this then generated revenue and wealth across the entire nation. And so when we talk affirmative action, it's like, just give us an opportunity to get what you stole from us, of what you didn't allow us to participate in. Allow us to be in that same room for all these benefits you gave everybody else.
Where do we fit in a joke about this shit, man? It just got serious, man.
Yeah. Just got real serious.
So, your turn.
Well, shoot, let me go with a sentence that's going to sound really controversial. Affirmative action is a lot like communism in the sense that it would be perfect if it worked out, but people are not perfect and they tend to screw it up. And that communism looks to create equality for all, but again, people are fallible and we screw it up every time. So finding a true definition of affirmative action is tough. I think that if you've been through a rough circumstance, you deserve to be compensated. You talked about this country's wealth was built on the backs of the people who didn't get paid for it. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, affirmative action on one level financially is like getting a tax refund. People, that's money you've earned. You're just asking for it back. You've put that into the economy, and now you just want a taste of what you and your ancestors have built to make America great. Guess what? If America ever was great, it wasn't because of white people. White people, you talked about stealing things. We're mad when we feel like we're getting stolen from because we invented that shit in America. We stole it first. We got here, there wasn't like a trademark on stealing shit. Right. But natives' land, native resources, rivers, trees, that was us.
Right.
We came in here first, and we just don't like people.
Argue.
We don't like people stealing our,
Don't steal what we stole.
Yeah, exactly. It's no takebacks, right?
Yeah, right.
Tag, you're it, no tag backs. That's us.
Yeah.
We're just running around yelling no tag backs.
Right.
So whenever you get a specific quantity or percentage involved in affirmative action, I think that's where it becomes really murky. Because you're right, the perception of somebody who hasn't really had to deal with it directly is that affirmative action sounds great in theory. But in practice, it's really, really tough. I went to a UC. You talked about the racial percentages. I went to UC Riverside, which is like UCLA's ugly sister. But if you're familiar with Riverside, California, Riverside, California is primarily Latino, very strongly Latino. The campus was very strongly Asian, a good chunk of white folks, some Latinos, and a couple of brothers. It was It was just drawn on these racial lines that didn't make sense for the city. Right. I would say that, I'd have to cross-reference, look it up, but the city was probably 60 to 70% Latino. The campus was 15 to 20%. Wow. There's such a strong discrepancy there. Yeah. So that's where, and people are saying that the Asian hate is a new thing. And it's a sad thing, but I went to a campus where the Asian students were kicking ass, and there was that. It was a resentment and jealousy at the model minority. Right. And so what affirmative action, I think, can do is it creates a certain hate for the people that are feeling like they're getting screwed over because they feel like, oh, it's working against me. Just because something is working for somebody else doesn't mean it's working against you.
Exactly.
This is a system that's been working against everybody else for hundreds of years. Right. So I don't know if I can make something funny out of that or not. Right?
Well, I was thinking about how I was going to cut that clip and just have you say Asian hate, Asian hate.
Asian hate.
In a loop where none of the viewers know that your wife is Asian. Right? So,
well, that's the thing. I'm a white guy from the Bay Area. Like, if we don't have Asian women, who are we going to marry? Like, that's
exactly.
It's our best option.
Jesus. damn headphones.
I threw
Get
mine
used
off
to these
earlier.
headphones. So in this discussion, I was thinking about it while you guys were talking. Is through affirmative action, let's update the conversation a little bit, because I find these statistics to be staggering too, because I've worked in prison systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked in 8 prisons. I've told people, male and female, I prefer working in female because I've never felt so sexy in my life, right? I just worked there just for the self-esteem. But
Yeah.
I've realized that by working in these prisons, mostly black and brown people have been incarcerated because of marijuana. It used to be illegal in this state, and now we're turning into this thing, and they see how much it can thrive and the economics behind it.
Right.
But the discretion there is how many of those dispensaries are black and brown owned now.
Exactly.
So I want to say in this state it's less than 10%.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But yet 90% of the inmates are black and brown
Right.
so that's where I'm like, so how do you affirmative action that shit? Just something that simple. And where again it's putting it into practice, but it's got to be fair enough where you've got to make sure that and what's his name? Dude that's a comic from Sacramento, Indian dude. He does a political satire.
Oh, Camille Nujabi?
Who the fuck are you?
Hassan, no, he was not from Sacramento. Nassan
Hassan Minaj.
yeah. Nicki Minaj's brother.
And he does a whole episode on Netflix about this subject, right?
He actually has a great show. It's a very good show.
It's a good show, man, and very intelligent dude. Way smarter than I could ever be. So, but he talks about it, and that's where I wanted to bring it up on my podcast, because I just feel like these numbers are so skewed. Where do you guys have any? I don't know if you smoke. I don't smoke, but and nothing against people that do. But I just find, just driving here, I dropped my girl off in Stockton, and we drove by, and there was a line of fucking people outside the dispensary
That's
on
awesome.
a Saturday at 9:00 in the
Right.
morning. Where I was like, but I know that the owner probably is white. So,
Right.
so how do you make that fair?
Well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if marijuana is a product that's used more by ethnic minorities or by white folks. It's people starting a business. And if you have that seed money, or the stems and seeds money, if it's marijuana, but the people with the seed money to start a business are going to be primarily white.
Right.
So
You don't want them
I
to
don't
be
think it
left
has
with
to do
roach.
with more people that are in prison or free that like to smoke. It's more of who has the money to start any business. And that's still primarily white folks. So it is going back to just kind of the racial inequality of the business world. It doesn't have to do with the product necessarily. It's the starting a business in general.
Yeah, it's a
Whites
racist
have money.
outcome.
It's easier to start a business when you have money.
Yeah, and I think that's doubled down, though, in that, there's one thing to have. So, one, I agree with you. And I think on top of that is there's a basic component of having capital and who has capital to start a business, which, your point, totally agree with it. But then you also think about the injustices that happened in order to even make this a market in the first place. So, growing up, watching Corners so that my boy Marvin and Solomon can actually make a sell was me contributing to that industry, knowing, though, that if I got caught watching for him, I don't know what they would have done with me. I was, a young kid. But if they got caught, it was a bid. They were gone.
Yeah.
And this has effectively happened to black and brown folk amazingly, while we're out here doing every other drug and alcohol and cigarettes and everything else, which actually have worse consequences. And these brothers are going to jail for medication.
Well, it's also, like you said, it's about corners. You see, white people, we have cul-de-sacs. It's easy to watch a cul-de-sac. There's one way in, one way out. It's classy, it's clean. It's like in front of Rick's house.
Totally acceptable.
So, yeah, if you guys just move to a place with cul-de-sacs, you'd be good.
Right. Stay out of the projects with Corners.
Yeah. Corner has 4 spots. Cul-de-sac, you got 1.
Yes.
That's all geographic. That's more city planning than anything else.
Right. So that's and I think cities have to look at that realistically. And so there's a basic piece of marijuana. Well, one, on those brothers still in jail, let's get them out of jail. for those charges. So, the basics of expungement. So we have so many folk, black and brown brothers, who are still in jail and or who have escalated sentences simply because of a marijuana enhancement.
Totally.
And it's no longer against the law in California. So how about we go and proactively remove all of those enhancements and then re-sentence every last one of those individuals?
What's
right
great is
now.
people on probation for violating something that was marijuana related.
Exactly.
So it's 2 steps away from actual marijuana crime.
Right.
It's just you did something that was kind of related to something that used to be illegal.
Exactly.
Your ass is still in jail.
And
That's
in the
fucked up.
meanwhile,
It really is.
they ain't got no capital. And the white person who was down here calling the cops on them just bought a dispensary.
I did. I mean, they did.
Right? Old boy from the cul-de-sac who called him on the boy in the corner. Now
Charlie Cul-de-sac. That's my new rap name. Lil Cul-de-sac. That's me.
Oh yeah, man. It's there's a lot of work to be done there. And actually, I'm going to give props because I know the NAACP is doing some work now. One on the expungement piece throughout the state, and then 2 as well on trying to get some equity around the ownership of dispensaries and the cannabis business and so on and so forth for black and brown brothers and so.
Boy Charlie Murphy, my main man Rick James. That's the one you think, the comedian Rick James. Get up.
I can't hear my neighbor crying, I can't breathe.
Please hit the subscribe button down low so you can see all new clips, all new episodes coming to you.